real talk about our real enemies. Guys, we've talked about this for a while, and I allude to it a lot. We've talked about it when the big Israel stuff came up, and that was really popular, and there was all the anti-Israel stuff going on, still going on a little bit, but when it was really hot and trending, I talked about it. I said Israel does terrible things, and they should be held accountable for those things. Israel plays games in our elections, in our politics, 100% should be held accountable for that. Israel is also not the main enemy of the world, as a lot of people are positing right now. They simply are not. They aren't old enough. They aren't embedded enough. They're not powerful enough. And there's also, they're not as evil as people say. They're also not as perfect, but, you don't go full Israel tar. We've talked about this a lot, but the reason is because the real enemy, actually comes from, the UK. And let's explain what, I truly believe after years of research. Excuse me. Now, let me set the table here for a minute first. When I talk about this stuff, I want you guys to know none of this is 100% take it to the bank, because they operate in the shadows. We don't have the exact information perfectly broken down of who our real enemies are, but we have a lot of evidence that points in the right direction. And so what I'm going to break down tonight, I put together this report tonight to share what I really believe the right direction is, who I believe is behind the corruption in Israel, who I believe is behind the communism in our country, who I believe is behind the globalist approach of selling out our country and trying to ruin us from within. This is who I believe it truly is, who runs the deep state, who planted in the deep state to run us, who runs the people who are the controlled opposition, like Nick Fuentes, which I have no doubt of anymore. It just becomes more and more obvious to me every day. And there's others I believe might be too, but I'm not going to call them out until I have more evidence. You just got to watch out for this stuff. But this is who I believe is truly behind it. So we're going to talk tonight about City of London and the background there. Now, for centuries, let me move this over here. Powerful financial empires operated from a single square mile in the heart of Britain, the City of London. This is not the same as London itself. The city is a semi-sovereign entity within its own governance, laws, and privileges, set it apart from the rest of the United Kingdom. Right there, I can bet most of you have never heard of this, or at least a lot of you have not. But it's true. They're like the Vatican inside of London. I didn't know about this until a couple years ago, but I've researched it, and it's very real. City's sovereign entity within its own self, set apart from the rest of the UK. Within this small district sits a true command center of global finance and political control. This square mile is home to the world's most influential banks, insurance companies, and investment houses. It operates outside normal democratic oversight, governed instead by the ancient City of London Corporation, a medieval institution answerable to no parliament or prime minister. The Lord Mayor of the city serves as a ceremonial head, but the real power lies with the private livery companies and financial elites that run its networks. So as I go here, guys, I guarantee you some of you might have questions. I want you to ask them. I will answer to the best of my ability. Again, this is just what I've come to learn. And this is information I pulled together tonight because I've learned this stuff from all over the place. And I did my best to try to pull some of this information in tonight into just a small report I could share with you guys. Again, not everything I read on this is like me being, I 100% believe this, but everything I read, I'm 90 to somewhere between 90 and 100% there. I can tell you I'm 100% sure that this is much closer to the truth than anybody who says Israel's behind everything or anything, a nonsense like that. Or anybody who says that Obama's behind everything. No, he's not. He's a controlled puppet. I 100% know that. This stuff I mostly believe. At the top of this power structure are long-established dynasties, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and other banking families who have controlled international finance for generations. From the Napoleonic Wars onward, they financed governments, dictated the outcomes of wars, and steered economic policy. Rothschild banking empire with branches in every major European capital perfected the model, used insider information, vast reserves of capital, and coordinated influence to dominate sovereign nations without firing a shot. Doesn't that sound like what we've been seeing? The destruction of our country, the destruction of worldwide politics, governance, sovereign nations, all without firing a shot. Yeah, it sounds really true, doesn't it? These families work in partnership with a network of allies, high-ranking politicians, media moguls, high-ranking politicians, Obamas, the Clintons, the Bidens. Sorry about my stupid dogs. My family will take care of it. My son's on it. So annoying. Oh my God, that's so obnoxious. Sorry, guys. I'll give it a second. Media moguls, royal families. Oh, you better believe the crown is a big part of this. Corporate leaders, secretive think tanks. Remember the crown? We talked about this the other night, the Five Eyes. What do they all have in common? UK, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, and the US. 4 of those 5 nations all still carry the queen on their money. They still look to the crown. They are all what's called the and of course I just lost the word. My stupid dogs. They ruined it for me, guys. They threw me off. The stupid dogs. I hope they didn't wake my little kids up. They're bulls from within. Don't get me wrong, but they're all a part of it. Secretive think tanks. Together they form what's often referred to as a Committee of 300. Elite council believed to have been in operation since the 18th century, making strategic decisions on war, peace, trade, and governance for the entire globe. These are the guys behind stuff like the Georgia Guidestones. Okay, and it started as 300, and now people believe it's actually closer to 3,000, somewhere in there, that run most of this. And so when we're looking at the real bad guys, it's not millions of people, it's not a giant army, but it's a small group of very powerful people. Most believe somewhere in the 3,000 to 5,000 person range. So pretty crazy stuff. Anthony asks, what about Al Gore being behind any of it, pulling strings from a cave somewhere? Excelsior, man, bear, pig. I think Al Gore, Al Gore is definitely part of it. Don't get me wrong there, but so are the Bushes, the Cheneys, the McCains, all of them. That's all that political, high-ranking politicians all were part of this. Yeah, my puppies are doing their job. They were barking at my daughter coming home. That's what it was. What's up, Big JR? Vinman says, in this UK royalty owns Hollywood. 100%, guys. The UK royalty owns Hollywood, and not only, like, everybody's like, the Jews run Hollywood, the Jews run Hollywood. No, the Jews have been put in power positions in Hollywood. The Jews have used their connections and their access to wealth and power to get in those positions of Hollywood, but they're not the ones actually behind Hollywood. Again, Israel has been used as a proxy to operate a lot of the globalists' desires and positions and control. Israel's been used as a proxy. Who created Israel? The number one backer of Israel, all the way back to the Balfour Declaration, I believe it's 1917, the UK. Once you guys look at all this, it all goes back to the UK, which makes perfect sense. And I'm not saying the UK is evil. I'm saying that's where this power structure comes from. Where does it all come from? Well, remember, what was the greatest empire in world history? Many at the top of their heads will say Rome. Others who are a little less knowledgeable about the past will say America. Nope. At the height of its power, the United Kingdom was the greatest empire in world history. It controlled most of the known world. including all the way from India to trade routes in Japan to much of Africa. You name it, they were all over the place. The United States, the colonies, the UK was the most powerful, and they never wanted to lose that power. We punched them in the face in 1776, got our full independence in 1781. We won, we broke free of them, and we started their decline, but they found other ways to hold on. They started working behind the scenes instead of in front of the scenes. JR asks, will the member live stay in YouTube? Try going to Rumble and dislike, so subscribe to both now. The plan for now, JR, is that they will continue on both for now. I want to eventually move fully to Rumble and get everybody in the Patreon. But I'll tell you, if everybody eventually moves to the Patreon, as I'm trying to scoot everybody over that way, I could still run a live on YouTube every time. I just won't do it the way I do it now. It'll be through a link like I do with Rumble. And I could still do that. The problem is that if I get into something dicey, YouTube could cut me off. So we'll see how it goes. But if you guys like the YouTube experience better, we can figure that out. P. Diddy a puppet? Oh, you better believe it. JR says, you're the number one Ace fanboy. Thanks, buddy. Vinman, when the UK realized they couldn't beat us, they became our heroes and that's part of it, for sure. Jack says, with all this going on, we're so fortunate their plans to take out Trump failed. Exactly. Trump. So there's been a few attempts to fight him back. Obviously, the founding fathers. And the early founding fathers were all anti-globalist. Jefferson, Adams, you name it. All the early ones were all good. Monroe, Jackson, Lincoln, very anti-globalist. And then the globalists really started getting in. There was a couple in the 1800s, but not too bad. Woodrow Wilson really started it in the 1900s. Wilson, fully owned by him. Roosevelt, partner with him. Truman, big time. Eisenhower, not so much, but also wasn't willing to fight back. Kennedy, willing to fight back. They killed him. What's his face after Kennedy? Lyndon B. Johnson, full in globalist, full in. Nixon, not. But Nixon didn't know how to fight them. But he was trying to steer the U.S. away from them in some ways, and they took him out. If you guys actually look at Watergate now, it seems like pittance compared to some of the stuff that's been going on since. But they forced him out. Who'd they install? Ford, full globalist. Carter, nincompoop, not a threat. Not a globalist, but not a threat. Had no idea what he was doing. They let him come in. Reagan, not a globalist, but also didn't know how to fully fight them. And I don't know what they had on Reagan, but you look at some of the stuff that got done under Reagan, it was very globalist. Very globalist. Like the vaccine, the big pharma being immune from being sued, stuff like that, but not a globalist. Bush, full-on globalist. Head of the CIA, vice president, full-on globalist. He even talked about the New World Order. Clinton, well, we know that. Bush too, obviously. Obama, the Manchurian candidate. He was the promised one, their savior. He was going to be the beginning of the end for the U.S. was Obama. They finally got their guy, and it was time. And Clinton was going to seal the deal. Trump stopped him, and we are saved because of him. What's up, Amanjo? Wakataga. Why are they importing third world directly into England now, though? Their goal is to complete. It's not England, okay? So, it's City of London is behind all this. City of London, again, small. It's like the Vatican inside of Italy. It's not the same as the UK. It's where the UK guys went. They want that in all the sovereign nations, because if you cause it to fall, because listen, the UK as it is today is built on similar principles to the United States, similar but different. In Europe, they've been slowly eroding all Christianity and all notions of freedom. And in order to do that, what they figure is they bring in all this, they keep bringing it in, they keep destroying Western society, the home of democracy, the home of republic. They destroy that, the home of Christianity. They destroy all that. Then they can fully take their place. They don't care if it's in their backyard, because eventually they believe they'll still be in charge. They would let it erode to the point where it falls apart. They can step in and they would slam it down immediately. Probably kill them all. Now we have 2-way subscriptions. All right, Jack, have a good night, man. Hope you catch some big guys. All right, let's keep going. City of London, not merely a financial hub. It's the operating base of a global financial cartel. Through institutions like the Bank of England, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and Bank for International Settlements, this network sets global interest rates, manipulates currencies, triggers or averts financial crisis to suit its needs. Sounds like 2008, doesn't it? Wars are not random, they are designed. Well, what have we learned since Trump's been in office? That's exactly true. The cabal funds both sides. Often true. Not entirely true. Why do you think they hate Russia so much? They hate Russia because Russia's not one of them. I actually talked to, talked to Vince about this today, how Russia was helping Lincoln in the Civil War. That's a fact. Russia has long been, except for the time when the Bolsheviks took over. But other than that, and even then, Russia was not, it was a different kind of globalism they were trying to take over. There wasn't the City of London folks. This was a whole nother beast. But Russia by itself, before and after the Soviet Union, very anti-globalist. And they hate Russia because Russia refuses to bow to anybody. And that's why they hate Russia so much. Assuring that no matter who wins, the debt flows back to the same bankers. This has actually been proven about World War II. This was true in the First and Second World Wars and modern conflicts from Middle East to Eastern Europe. Economic depressions, inflationary spikes, austerity programs are also deliberate tools. Isn't this interesting? Austerity programs. You guys know what austerity program is? Austerity program is when they're trying to convince everybody to cut the budget. Now, we have a budget issue, don't get me wrong, but I learned the craziest thing the other day. I was listening to a podcast about somebody breaking down the history of our economy. And did you guys know that before the Federal Reserve and the income tax, the United States never ran on a budget? How crazy is that? We simply were looking to spend money all the time. Now, we didn't print money, so that's different. But this idea of tightening our belts never happened. It was always, how can we keep investing in the country to grow? That was always the aim of America. And that's one of the reasons they hated us. It's one of the reasons they wanted a central bank to control us, why they wanted an income tax to control us. Before, we were bringing in money, and it was all investing in the country all the time. That's why we grew so much our first 150 years. From this little middling nation that barely kept England away, beating them off with broomsticks, to the great economic powerhouse of the world in 150 years. Explain that. Well, it's all that right there. Is that how we ran our economy. And austerity programs are, first of all, income tax is their idea. Federal Reserve Central Bank, their idea. Austerity, having a budget to keep at a certain point, keep us all lock and key under this budget, is their idea. How crazy is that? But it's true. It's true. By destabilizing economies, the cabal forces governments into dependence on loans and dictates the terms. Whoa, really? You don't say? Opening markets to foreign exploitation, dismantling national industries, and transferring wealth upward to the elite. Guys, they've been trying to, I should say, weed out all power in the middle class for 100 years. They've been building a greater wage cap for 100 years. COVID was supposed to be their magnum opus, their great, and Trump, because he was able to subvert that. That was going to be the final blow to us all. We were going to be kept down on lockdowns for decades, a decade or two at least. They were going to starve us. They were going to rob us of our jobs, and they were going to make us fully dependent on the government. And they weren't able to do it. They were going to usher in their great reset using COVID, and we beat it. And that's why Trump loves the vaccine so much. Not because he thinks it's good, not because he doesn't know the issues in it, but because without announcing that vaccine, they would have kept us on lockdown. Biden would have come in and said, "There's no vaccine for this. My predecessor was reckless, and because there's no vaccine, there's no way out on this. I am going to put the full country on lockdown." That's what would have happened without the vaccine. The word is, and I don't have proof on this. There's a little proof, but I don't have enough proof. But the word is that most of that first vaccine was saline solution. It was announced as a vaccine. And if you look back, the problems with people's health really didn't start until the boosters. But we'll see if that gets me kicked off YouTube. Vinman says, what are the odds of Jefferson, Davis, and Lincoln fighting against each other, being born 1 year apart in Kentucky while looking like brothers, looking like they had Martian syndrome? I don't know. I'm not getting into that one, man. That's a little too crazy for me. Q-Lords, yeah, man, I'm covering it. Good to see you. But look at what's happened to our markets. Look at what's happened to the wealth of the middle class. I mean, all this makes sense now, doesn't it? Global infrastructure of control. From the city's perspective, national sovereignty is an obstacle to be managed. Over the last century, the Cabal has built a web of globalist institutions designed to bypass national governments and centralized authority. These include United Nations, the World Economic Forum, Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group. Heard of all those guys? Through these bodies, the Cabal sets policy on everything from climate regulations to digital currency rollouts and ensuring global compliance. What did Marco Rubio just say the United Nations plan? F you. We're not playing your climate games anymore. Beautiful stuff. Why it matters now. Today, the same City of London network is working towards its long-standing goal, a unified global governance system with full control over finance, trade, energy, health, and information. Digital currencies, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, will give them the power to monitor, control, and even shut off individual transactions. What has Trump announced? Not on his watch, never. Global health emergencies. Oh, we've seen that. The health treaties, they tried to get us to sign a health treaty with the WHO that we would enforce vaccinations on any pandemic. We said no. Climate regulation. Well, we just saw some on that one. Agenda is simple. Eliminate independent national economies, dissolve democratic checks, and move all decision-making in the hands of small, unelected financial aristocracy headquartered in the city of London. And that is why, my friends, why they're even allowing illegals into their own country. Now, let's do a quick little timeline of how this got started. So, late 18th century, we got Mayor Armschel Rothschild established a banking house in Frankfurt. His sons expand across Europe, founding a multinational financial network. This becomes the backbone of what evolves into a global ultra-elite ruling force. Now, I want to add something here before we go further on this. That is the official timeline of the City of London, okay? And we're going to go through it up till now. But I want to add that this actually goes back much further. These people, in the Bible, God talks about, he calls the devil the prince of this world. And then in Genesis, when Adam and Eve sinned, remember, God had gave them the garden, and he said, I want you to subdue the earth, have lots of babies, procreate, subdue the earth. In other words, turn the rest of the world into the Garden of Eden. In other words, Garden of Eden was a little place. It wasn't the whole earth. And they were going to turn the rest of the world into the Garden of Eden. But then they sinned. And in sinning, they gave up their sovereignty. Remember, in God, or not their sovereignty, but their calling, their authority. And God takes from them their authority, and then he says, cursed is the ground, you're subjugated, the woman's subjugated to you, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff, okay? But at that point, who did they choose to serve? Well, by sinning and choosing the serpent, they served Satan. As mankind created in God's image, they turned towards the snake. They gave their authority to him, and God kicked him out of the garden. Well, when that happened, Satan becomes the prince of this world, which is what Jesus calls him in Matthew 4 when Jesus is being tempted. And what happens in Matthew 4? What does Satan offer Jesus? He takes him to a giant mountain and looks at all the kingdoms of the world and he says, serve me and I'll give you all this. And how can he say that? Because it was all his at the time. God was still God. He's still God of the universe. Okay. But he had given the earth to man and man had given it to Satan. Jesus dies, goes into hell, takes the keys of death and eternity from Satan, comes back, rises from the dead, and says to his followers before he leaves, before he ascends into heaven the last time, all authority on heaven and earth has now been given to me. And then what does he say? Now go. Now go. Those words are very important because what Jesus did in that moment is he took the authority over the earth away from Satan, who's no longer a prince of this world, and gave it to us. And that's why the world has been getting slowly better ever since Jesus came. We are now fulfilling the promise of Adam and Eve, subduing the earth, taking it back. It's harder now because there's a lot of people in there, okay? Now, a lot of bad stuff going on, but Satan's no longer the prince of the earth. And the proof of this is that Paul, in writing about Satan later, calls him the prince of the air. He no longer uses the phrase prince of the world. Why is he the prince of the air? Because in the spiritual realm, Satan lies to us. He tries to manipulate people to do stuff, but he's no longer in charge of the earth. Why is that important? Well, if you also go back to the Old Testament, lots of tribes, the people who always went against God, who did they serve? Molech. Well, Molech is basically Satan. What did they do? Child sacrifice, virgin sacrifice, drink the blood. Every time the Jews turned away from God, what did they start doing? Child sacrifice. What do we know about the globalist elites now? Child sacrifice, trafficking. So while the current center of the globalist cabal is in the city of London, I believe, this goes all the way back because Satan can't create anything new. He has no new ideas. His ideas are the same. They've always been. He still has his people worshiping him, worshiping Molech, killing babies, trafficking children, doing terrible things. And their current form, where they all try to rule from now, where Satan is trying to become prince of this world again, is through these people in the city of London. So I hope that helps a little bit. Okay, now back to the current city of London. Founded by a Rothschild, early 19th century, Rothschild finance began shaping war outcomes and national debts. Their leveraged capital places them at the center of European power structures, fueling the belief they've secretly commanded international policies and conflicts. Into the 20th century, the Committee of 300. In 1727, the Committee of 300 is allegedly formed by British aristocrats as an ultra-elite council coordinating global politics, commerce, banking, media, and military operations. Leaders like the Rothschilds and royal persons sit at its head. Later, narrators label it the hidden hand, with Rothschilds as prominent, though not sole figures. Conspiratorial literature expands on this, depicting the committee as a real-time world government shaping everything behind the scenes. I don't believe they ever fully controlled everything behind the scenes, but they've always been trying. Mid-20th century to Cold War. City of London emerges as a physical nerve center of the cabal. Its unique governance structure, city corporation, livery companies reinforce its image as a quasi-independent seat of ancient, unelected power. Keyword, ancient power. Whenever anybody ever talks about ancient power, they're not talking about God. Anytime somebody references ancient power, they're talking about demonic power. This is actually perfectly illustrated in the Chronicles of Narnia when the White Queen, the Snow Queen, I think she's called the White Queen though, who is a stand-in for Lucifer, teases them with the ancient power. It's always alluding to Satan. And why? Because God doesn't speak in time like that. You know why? Because God is outside of time. So Jesus never speaks of power of old of the days. He never speaks like that because Jesus, to God, it's always the present. There is no tomorrow. There is no yesterday. It's always the present. God's outside of time. And that's a key right there. Modern late 20th century, New World Order narrative emerges, claiming global elites use crises to drive the world towards centralized authoritarian rule. City of London is regarded as the ideological and financial host of the system. Think tanks and institutions like the UN, EU, CFR, WEF, and Bilderberg are viewed as downstream enforcers of the Cabal's agenda, smoothing the path to global governance. You don't say. Recent decades. Israel is increasingly believed by some to be financially backed or politically influenced by city-backed interests, used as a geopolitical pawn to expand global strategy. What'd I tell you? European Union project of forced regional integration, born from the Kalergi Plan and driven by city elites and institutions to dissolve national sovereignty. Again, why do they not care about all the immigrants coming in, dissolving their sovereignty? That is why. In the U.S., alleged ties between city-backed networks and government officials, CFR members, Treasury, Federal Reserve influences are thought to enforce globalist policies from trade agreements to digital surveillance. Early 21st to today, digital currencies, health mandates, climate treaties, viewed as modern tools of control designed by the elite network to centralize authority, monitor populations. The spread of conspiracy culture through social media and alternative media fuels belief in the cabal's reach into current affairs, elections, financial policy, and international diplomacy. You could call it the awakening, is what I like to call it. So, and this is just repeating what I already had. So anyways, listen. So guys, that is the breakdown of what I've been constantly speaking of, but never have gone into detail about who the globalists, what their seat of power truly is. Again, I can't prove this 100%, but what I can do is tell you, I have done many, many deep dives over the years into this. And I will tell you, the deeper I go, it always comes back to City of London. Always, without fail. And so because of that, I have truly gone to the belief that this is true. This is how it's going. This is where the power structures come from. And if you think about it, when you put this in, it's like the missing piece in a puzzle. When you put it in, all of a sudden, everything else starts to make more sense. It makes way more sense than saying Israel's behind everything. Israel got founded in 1948. It's 6 million people. It's, it's a blip. It's smaller than New Jersey. There's no way they could just all of a sudden, with less than 100 years, control the world. That makes zero sense. But if somebody's using them to do stuff, that makes sense. It also makes Israel not fully evil. And in some ways, you could look at them as a victim. And I'm not calling out, I'm not saying Netanyahu or anything like that. I'm saying the nation itself. Okay. It's important. That's an important distinction. But this is why, because of this is not something you hear from Nick Fuentes. This is not something you hear from Whitney Webb, who's going after the technocracies. And they're calling that the technocratic government is what's going to take over, or Israel's running everything. Anytime I hear that, guys, I have deep dived all of those theories, and none of them pass the sniff test once you go deep. Once you go deep, it all falls apart, and City of London is the only thing that makes sense. So again, I can't 100% prove it, but I can tell you with 90 to 95% certainty that this makes more sense than anything else out there. So